Welcome to the virtual Natural Resource Management Tour across the Rangelands of outback Queensland. We had a bus trip planned, but the pandemic had other ideas. But we're not going to let that stop us. Over the next hour, we'll get our boots dirty with virtual dust and meet grassroots landholders who daily implement successful natural resource management processes. We'll explore how rotational grazing works in marginal country. We'll meet a couple who strive to pull overused pastures into a biodiverse landscape. We'll meet a landholder who is bringing together the environmental concerns of threatened species while still running a profitable grazing enterprise. Our drive will take in some of the high points of the region. We'll cross desert rivers, explore the lakes of the Desert Uplands, and so much more. We'll be travelling 2,000 kilometres in the next hour, so fasten your seatbelts and let's go. We are north of Buckhalden in the Desert Uplands region. We are driving into the property called Adelong. And we meet Jeff and Kate Urquhart, who are driving change on this property.
We've been here about 22 months, coming the end of 19 sort of thing. We're sort of running this 55,000 acres roughly here at Adelong, and we're running a sort of breeder operation sort of thing, selling weaners at this stage, straight off the cow.
So we just started looking around and formed a list of what we wanted in a property. Looked around and Adelong came up.
We run predominantly Brahman cross cows at this stage. We've of late been putting red Angus bulls into the thing, aiming for the southern markets.
So before we even got out here, we jumped online and tried to find out all the information we could using forage and climate, getting our rainfall data, ground cover data, the land type data. So before we even hit the ground, we had a bit of an idea what was actually here on Adelong and Coorabah. We looked around and did some figures on what the return for what we paid, what we could return, and we really liked what was possible out here. We headed out to the Desert Uplands, and so far we're really impressed. It's been better than we could have expected being out here. We have been lucky. We have had a couple of half okay wet seasons, so we sort of came in at the right time. But certainly, what we're seeing, we're really impressed with what's possible here. I guess when we think about challenges, it goes straight back to when we originally looked at the property. We knew that there was quite a bit of infrastructure that we would want to put in. That was finding a way of mapping that out and actually accurately trying to map distances of fences and that sort of thing, so we could pull a budget together. So for the first 18 months to 2 years that we actually knew what sort of costs we were actually going to hit up front. So we used some mapping tools, computer mapping tools, to measure out distances, so we had a good idea of what we were faced with.
We also used the land type mapping so that we could map to land type and grass species a bit, sort of thing, along those lines.
Knew we had a lot of work ahead of us.
There was a lot of work and a lot of challenges and everything like that, but the cattle were telling us that the country was good, sort of thing. The condition of the cows, the size of the weaners for the season they were having, sort of thing. It gave us a good structure to start with, sort of thing, to work from. There was very minimal fencing, sort of thing, so as to land type or anything like that, so with a lot of fencing and development with waters as well, we could see a lot of potential for upside, sort of thing. The seasons weren't favourable when we came here, and with the uncontrolled movement of cattle, from the better country, the Gidgee type countries, through to the spinifex, and so the Gidgee type, or the better soils and better pastures, were overutilised, and the spinifex type country was well and truly underutilised for the reasons of no water really in that country, and all the water being in the better country. We want to spread some more waters around and utilise that better and make it a little bit more user friendly for the cows. Summertime is fine here, we get a lot of surface water sort of thing, but yeah, come after sort of June, July, that dries back and cattle do have to start to walk. Along Reedy Creek there was a rubber vine issue we noticed when we on inspections.
Tackling rubber vine was something we knew we'd have to do, but it wasn't something that put us off or scared us away from moving here.
And we've done approximately, I don't know, new and repaired, we're getting up around that 70 kilometres of fencing sort of thing, and we're starting to put some laneways in now for ease of management, and so we can rest country. We're sort of cutting the land types up a bit smaller sort of thing so that we can rest without affecting the bottom balance of having to lock up huge amounts of area to get rest or pasture diversification into it sort of thing. And so that's part of the reason we've cut it up a little bit smaller is to help with that side of things. Desert channels have had a role with helping with all the weeds and the fencing sort of thing, so it's a really good positive outcome, I think, with how everything's going with all that sort of stuff. We're certainly happy with the help we've been given and greatly appreciate it.
We're looking at some erosion issues. Desert channels have also helped us pull in some expert knowledge on and to look at the areas and give us some ideas of how we can start tackling some of those regions of high erosion just on a small basis, not huge costs because we've got so much to do here, but just to get us thinking about what we can do in small scale as well. So yeah, that's been a great help.
Going forward, the future where holes for us is positive at this stage. We want to be an economical, viable proposition sort of thing, property. We want grass cover, ground cover, which we've sort of, as to date, is going really well. Using long paddock data and everything like that, we're really seeing big changes in the right direction sort of thing. So that's a positive feeling for what we're doing, is all good. Yeah, we want to not only improve the ground cover, we want to improve cattle condition and sort of have us in a position that sort of we can sort of control our seasons with our cattle to suit what rain events we get sort of thing going forward sort of thing.
Sustainability of business and the land we run our business on is quite big for me. It's a probably one of my inbuilt aspirations I have. So not only to be able to run the business profitably, but improve the land condition while we're doing it and continually improving it. So setting that bar very high and reassessing constantly where we are. So I don't think we can have a successful grazing business without monitoring our land and improving our land as we go. Sustainability for me with land is like a inbuilt value that I have. So and I think I want to work on when it comes to land. I want to see improving.
Jeff and Kate have analysed the potential of their property using mapping and forage programs. They've partnered with Desert Channels, and Kate says she can see a biodiverse, healthy landscape in the future, given a couple of good wet seasons. As relative newcomers to the region, Jeff and Kate say they are particularly thankful to neighbours who have been open in sharing knowledge of the area, what works and what doesn't. Back on our virtual bus, we continue in a northerly direction. A short detour shows us the amazing presence of large, shallow lakes in this dry landscape. Lake Dunn is 6 square kilometres when full and home to 80 species of birds, particularly migratory water birds. The lake attracts locals and visitors alike with a small collection of lakeside shacks. Fishing for the golden perch or yellowbelly is an attraction. But it's time to move on, and we are now in the headwaters of the Thompson River system near the small community of Torrance Creek. Near here, we drive out to Tubrac Station and meet David Rankin, who has taken a controversial approach to the management of this marginal desert uplands country. The implementation of natural resource management practices has allowed the safe grazing of country where the poisonous weed heartleaf once rendered almost 50% of the property worthless as grazing land.
My name's David Rankin. We live on Tubrac Station, south of Torrance Creek. We bought it in 2001. It's roughly 76,000 acres that was practically undeveloped. There was 5 dams and a bore, and the bore just had 500 metres of polypipe offered into a small waterhole. When we came here, we've since improved that to 90 kilometres of 63 mil poly. There's nearly 60 watering points and 23 paddocks over the property, and we run a rotational grazing system here with breeders and adjust our steers to 18 months of age, feeding them into as a feeder steers into the feedlot industry in the south, or in certain times they sometimes rarely go live export. The makeup of the pasture is roughly 10% of the more desirable pasture, with the 90% of the pasture being spinifex and white spear or feathertop. So when we bought it, we discarded the heartleaf country. We weren't considering it of any value, and fenced it it was pretty well fenced out anyway, but we gained probably another 3,000 or 4,000 acres out of that heartleaf area that was clear of heartleaf. First of all, fenced that in, and then our first year here in 2001 was considerably dry, and there was no boundary fence outside the fenced off area. When we struck the first dry year, all we could do was open gates out into that unimproved area. The first storm saw sort of 300 or 400 head missing, and we located them on a neighbour's water 35 kilometres away. Anyway, we gathered them all back without problem, and then realised after that year that there was a future in grazing the heartleaf area. So we fenced the boundary and have slowly developed that area since. Initially we were only grazing the heartleaf area sort of July, August on, because it appeared to be less problematic during drier times. Then as times evolved, we've cut it up into smaller paddocks. All the heartleaf free area has been cut into roughly 2,000 acre paddocks, and the heartleaf area into 4,000 acres. I would definitely think that we're better off by running a rotation. We're not walking cattle any great distance. We're just tipping them from one paddock into the next. All our water points are along the fence lines, so it's for half the cattle, it's just a matter of opening the gate and they walk through. For the other half that are watering on the other side of the paddock, at max they've got 4 kilometres to walk along. Normally we just start them up on a horse or a motorbike and head them in the right direction quietly, and they're to the stage now where 99% of them just toddle along to the next water and out into the clean paddock. They're looking for somewhere to go. There's only a single herd, so we've got up to 2,000 head in one mob, going through paddocks from 2,000 to 4,000 acres. So within a week they graze those paddocks quite substantially. We've got a minimum of a maximum, of 2 kilometre water radiuses over the whole place. So that's giving fairly good access for cattle to evenly graze it. So with that mixed in with our rotational grazing, we get a fairly even graze over the paddock. All of this country would get in excess of 340 days rest out of the year. And when I say that, I have gone and looked at my figures often, because it just seems too much, because that only gives cattle are only in the paddock for 20 odd days. But we have got 23 paddocks, and we move through them 3 times a year. So when I said in excess of 340 days, that is exactly right. That's how long, and that's how I can say confidently that every paddock literally gets a wet season spell every year without intentionally locking it up or wasting the feed. When I talk about setting up for rotational grazing, it's really only the fencing that's extra. The water distribution is relevant to set stocking rates as well, and it's considered that 1.5 kilometre radius is ideal. We went to 2 kilometres, mainly due to the marginal country. Our weight gain here is probably about 0.2 of a kilo per head per day, 200 grams. We generally send our weaner steers to the downs south of Hughenden if it's available, and there we can expect between 400 and 800 grams a head a day over a 12-month period. I think 800 is about the best we've done. The last 2 years we've kept our steers here and sold them 18 months of age, and they were roughly 200 to 250 kilos. Yet on the downs in 18 months we can expect them to be 3 to 350. Our calving percentage is quite variable, mainly compared to seasons most relevant with it. Last year was a record year. I think we had about 83%, or 3 years in a row leading up to last year was either high 70s, early 80s. This year our pregnancy rate, when we preg tested in May, was down as low as 70, and so we're expecting about 630 odd calves out of that. We don't particularly do grass checks and so forth to monitor pasture. By rotational grazing, it's very easy to see what's happening. You only have to look ahead at what paddocks are in front of you and back into the ones you've moved out of, and you can soon see how much grass you've got. Donna keeps Grazing Charts, which monitors the stock days taken out of a paddock, and the stock days per hectare per 100 mils does seem, we call it our benchmark, and when you're getting close to that, you know that if you don't get more rain within a month or two, you can say, well, we're going to have to move cattle if we don't. And if it's July, August, and you can see that sort of coming up within a month, well, you're pretty certain you're not going to get rain. So you need to make arrangements to shift cattle out of the district.
David and Donna Rankin have shown that innovative thinking, research and record keeping can turn marginal country into a sustainable grazing enterprise while improving species diversity and environmental improvement across the wider landscape. Back on the road, we're heading for the vast open rangelands of the Mitchell Grass Downs. But before we leave the uplands, we'll make one more call to see the Desert Channel's Queensland field crew in action. We turn into Uanda Station, owned by the Murray family. The DCQ crew is getting ready to carry out a controlled burn on a recently treated rubber vine infestation. The DCQ team goes to work. There is a skill in calculating the time to burn. The moisture content of the dead weed needs to be just right. Too green and the burn will not be successful. Too dry and the fire will be too hot, with possible damage to native species. This is bush science at work. The infestation along Prairie Creek is soon literally going up in smoke. The importance of this operation to halt the downstream advance of rubber vine is particularly important on Prairie Creek. It is the headwaters of the Thompson-Cooper system. And we have time to meet landholder Scott Murray, who was happy with the support from Desert Channels.
Yeah, well, with Desert Channels, we are sort of really getting into it because it's only just like this rubber vine's just getting a hold on in this Prairie Creek system here. So I sort of brought it to the attention of Desert Channels, and so we've actually, we're trying to get in now and knock it about a fair bit, or eradicate it. Yeah, when we get heavy rain, when it's a good wet season, and because we're on the headwaters here of the Lake Eyre catchment, is it's spreading via the water running downstream, so it's carrying the seed downstream. But I'm finding the seed is also spreading via, we have an easterly wind, and it's also blowing the seed upstream. Just keeps on moving further and further a year upstream as well via, I think, wind. Yeah, Desert Channels support has been excellent with what they're doing to try and control this rubber vine, and also Parkinsonia as well along the creek system as well. They've been really good. Yes, the funding that Desert Channels has received has been a very big help in eradicating this rubber vine. I think without that funding that they've received, it'd be very hard to control it. So it's been really good. I've seen other creek systems where it's gotten away, and it just gets thicker and thicker and chokes out all the native trees. And also for the ease of, because we're running cattle, is, cattle get in it and can't get them, or it costs a lot of money to get them out. And yeah, it's just not good for the water system. They've had Desert Channels have conducted a couple of little field day sessions here with it, and there's been a pretty wide sort of area of properties that have come and had a look and see what's happening with it, and I think they're keen to see how it all goes. I think working with Desert Channels, this is going to be a pretty important part of our, every year working with weeds, with them and the weeds, doing an eradication programs. I think, it's going to be ongoing from now on. As long as they're with us, I think, it's going to take at least 10 years or a decade to probably slowly, get it under control. Over 10 years, I'd reckon.
Our virtual bus is now rolling down through the great catchments of outback Queensland. Since the coming of Europeans, the open downs country has been lusted after by livestock producers. Natural, open plains. But in the first quarter of the 20th century, the introduction of a shade and fodder tree, prickly acacia, placed these Mitchell grass plains and the livestock industry under threat. Prickly acacia changed tracts of the open downs into forests. The invasive weed clogged waterways. Management of livestock was made more difficult and expensive. Desert Channels Queensland has been at the forefront of controlling the weed in Queensland with a combination of approaches. Success today comes through cutting-edge control methods, contractual agreements with landholders, shared investment and support from the DCQ field teams to tackle major infestations. While many properties are still battling the woody weed, today we meet landholder Jeff Wells at Ortay on the Downs country near Barcaldine. Jeff is winning the battle.
We're on Ortay, it's 20,000 acres. It's actually split into two separate blocks. We usually run cattle on it. At the moment we don't have hardly any on because of the drought. Prickly acacia has been the biggest challenge we've had here. It's there was a fair percentage of the property was covered in it. Some areas were extremely thick, some are just sort of scattered, and we've tried to eradicate it. We've probably got 95% at the moment that's dead. and yeah, it's all starting to fall over and the country's starting to open up again. We're probably on top of it as such. If we got some decent seasons, it might come back a bit and we'd have to get right back into it and put a bit more time into it again. But at the moment, it's well and truly on top of it. We will have to continue it into the future. It's an ongoing thing. I think it could take up to 20 years to totally eradicate it. There are some neighbouring properties with a little bit on, which it does wash down the creeks, but we get straight onto them like as soon as they come up, so the spread of the seed doesn't get going. But no, it's going to be an ongoing thing for a long time. But the main time and the cost has been we've done that, so we've just got to keep going with it. When we bought the place, there was a 5-year plan in place with DCQ. I think we came in year 2 of it. They'd already started some patches, and then we continued on with it. And then once we had that 5-year plan stuff done, we just got in and cleaned up a lot of other areas which weren't thick ourselves. And then there was a couple more patches that were just sort of too much for us to get on top of, and we brought DCQ back in to help us out with. When we first bought the place, we fenced it up, made the paddocks a lot smaller, and we'd start in one corner of the place and do a full paddock, and then slowly work our way around. But yeah, we have fenced it up to try and keep paddocks that are clean, and if we know there is a paddock, there is a tree we've missed, we'll try and we won't put those cattle into a clean paddock, as they'll carry the seed. Paddocks we have got clean, we don't allow, if we think something may have seed in it, we don't allow stock back into it until we know they're clean. We've used mainly grassland pellets, or not grassland as such, but that same chemical for probably 95% of it. We have done some basil spraying around the native trees, and we've also used a mister where it's really thick. And Desert Channels have used a drain, and they're teams of 4 and 5 blokes on bikes go through. But most of it's just done by hand with throwing out the pellets. We've tried a few different things with the pellets. We've used, we had a gas gun we used for a bit, but didn't find it too good. It was, it's probably let us down a bit in places. The pellets might have been going through it properly. But apart from that, we've just mainly used it by hand. We measure it with a teaspoon every now and then just to make sure we're using the right amount. When they use the drain, I think that it just spins it out of it. But no, mainly, 95% would be by hand. We've invested a lot of money in the infrastructure and also to get rid of these prickly trees, but going forward, hopefully it will rain. And we've spent the money, we've got the fences done, got the prickly acacia under control, got the waters done. We can, hopefully graze it properly and try and get some of the bare patches where it was flogged out, where the prickly acacia was thick, get them back. We're just in the process of putting up an exclusion fence. We thought we may have to go into sheep if we do have some big seasons to help with the prickly acacia, because they do get on top of those little plants as they come up. And if we got that fence there, we won't have the dog problem. And it's just it's going to be a good management tool. You can lock paddocks up and go back, and hopefully they'll be the way you left them. Because we did the waters and the fencing, that's just so we can manage the country properly and not have one area getting chewed out and one area which the cattle won't walk into, or the sheep. And we've also, with this dog fence, it'll help us with our just complete grazing pressure. We can lock paddocks up and be able to keep it under control the way we want to keep it under control.
Jeff Wells demonstrates an example of hard work and persistence that shows that invasive weeds can be beaten. For anyone interested in exploring a more in-depth coverage of how prickly acacia is being handled in outback Queensland, invest the time and take a look at the DCQ Rangelands conference presentation, one of the online presentations you have access to with this conference. Surprising what you see on outback tracks. We pass, of all things, a camel muster. Some properties are finding camels under specific management regimes are assisting with prickly acacia control. We pass through small towns and communities clinging to the broad landscape. We take time to call in on John and Janine Waring, catching up with them on Eversley. Like so many producers, his enterprise is faced with years of below average rainfall, and when rain does come, he is investing time and effort into speeding up recovery.
For the grazing practices, what we sort of looked at doing ultimately was running sheep and cattle jointly. We found earlier with the limited amount of rainfall, if we put cattle through some of the channels or the creek country first and then moved them on, then rotate the sheep in after, we seemed to get more out of the country. The cattle and sheep graze differently, and the cattle were knocking a lot of vegetation on the ground, of which the sheep are little vacuum cleaners. They seem to clean that up a bit. So that started a bit of an idea, and we have fenced Eversley. We've made a start on it. All the materials there, a lot of the posts are in the ground, with a view to be able to run our sheep across cattle country as well, but we've just got to eliminate the dog factor, hence the fence. So what we've been doing is picking the country type, so the channel country that gets a bit of a run, a bit of a flood, and grows a lot of different species of weed and herbage and stuff early in the piece. Try and run the cattle down there, concentrate them a little bit down there, because that particular fodder disappears very rapidly, letting the opener downs country and the alluvial downs like rejuvenate Mitchell grass. And then we started locking country up on the red pebbly ridges with the Mitchell grass for about 6 months before we shifted cattle back in there. Original idea was for the maiden heifers. We're juvenile mating our heifers, so towards the end of the year we wanted some good solid country that young heifers with milk teeth can actually have a calf and get to through to the next wet season with a bit of feed. And we noticed each year that country just seemed to get better and better, even with limited rainfall. So we're actually now cutting Eversley up a little bit more to try and make advantage of country that I believe has got more potential than what it's showing at the minute. And hopefully we get a couple of good seasons back to back. After we've done our little exercises, we should be able to run a lot more cattle efficiently on the place. We've got a bit of open downs country in the middle of the block, which is tighter type country. And even with the limited rainfall we've had in the last 5 years since Janine and I've owned the place, and I know it was a good 4 or 5 years of limited rainfall before that, we locked that country up for the juvenile mated heifers, the ones preg-tested in calf, because we join at 13 months old, and then preg-test, and then those ones have got some good downs country to go on, because you need to look after those younger heifers with no teeth to get them through that end of this sort of time of the year now into the wet season. The rotation of cattle is driven, I would say, more by rainfall and position at the end of the year. This year we've done a dramatic cull, and we just moved a considerable number off the place. Otherwise, if I hadn't addressed that situation, I would not be in a position to properly wet season spell with the numbers of cattle that would have been here and the number, the amount of land that's available. So, answer to the question would be, it is seasonal how we've done it, but straight after that first bit of wet season, the particular paddocks that have got that Mitchell grass, they're emptied straight away. Reason being is you've got a bit of herbage on the ground. It has rained, so there is herbage in the creek areas. So your little heifers, you've got them that far, get them out into the main herd and look after those couple of small cut up sections to just get that grass growing and get some body into it. Yeah, part of the management practices early in the piece, we were like all keen and we're going to make the world go round. So the practices were build numbers and build quality herd. We've also found now that numbers is good, but quality's probably more important. So the destocking, we've started destocking this year. So we started with anything that was empty that slipped a calf. Then we went into some leftover steers from last year, just to lighten off a bit more. And then we went into some number 9 feeder heifers. So we've been basically destocking gradually all year, so we wouldn't end up like at the end of the year with a whole heap of problems. Once we got our numbers up, the restocking part is not the big thing, it's the destocking and your replacement heifers filling the numbers. We think now we've got a handle on the number of breeders that we can substantially keep all the time. And once again, I think we've found the quality of the stock helps a little bit rather than just quantity. Quantity's it's good for the checkbook, but quality, a little bit more money for the product and a little bit less eaten grass. Probably on the western side of Eversley and the southern side, there's Jerkin Creek channels, Horse Creek channels and the Landsborough channels. A couple of years in a row now, we've experienced very, very limited rainfall. However, that country in 2019 received a lot of flood thanks to the neighbours. Water come down the Landsborough channels, Rockwood Creek, and really, really opened that country up and put it under water for a bit. So it became very, very good when the rest of the country didn't get any rain. So what we looked at doing then is fencing some of that country out so we could utilise it early in the year when there's a lot of herbage, and in the fencing side of it, not only for dogs and trying to run sheep, but if you can keep all your other feral animals out and control that country, the areas a bit tighter sort of country, up a little bit higher, the red ridges and a bit of pebbly country there, proper fenced off, we can control it a whole lot better, and hence the interest from Desert Channels interested in starting on wet season spelling and rotations where we can actually control the country. So we've actually started putting up a predator fence around Eversley with DCQ as an interested party in monitoring the grass growth, and we record and report to them stock movements in and out of that particular country they're looking at. And I think once we finish the fence, we'll have a very accurate idea of what that pasture can and cannot feed. Desert Channels, they've got cameras, monitoring stations at which they come and visit. And once we complete the project, it'll be very interesting how it goes with this wet season spelling.
To speed up recovery, John Waring has trialled seeding Mitchell grass with a combination seeder. This innovative approach has already given returns, and as John says, once he has a healthy ground cover of the perennial, it will self-seed, far more economical than machine seeding. On the road again, now following the Thompson River south of Longreach. We're getting close to the end of our virtual tour, only 2 more properties to visit. We drive into Tubrac Station, a mixed merino, sheep and cattle enterprise. We meet Neil and Mary Rogers, whose family has held the property for more than a century. Traditional knowledge built up over a century sees the Tubrac operation working with the seasons in the outback's variable climate. Neil Rogers is without doubt passionate about his pastures.
What better mix you want in the paddock? You got Mitchell grass, you got your barley, you got your curly, you got bluegrass, flinders grass, button grass, plus all your perennials and herbs that are growing around.
And Neil talks to us on the banks of the beautiful waterhole near the homestead.
Tubrac is 50,000 acres with Gloucester as well. We've been here 125 years. It's very interesting, all the history of the place with the sheep and cattle carrying capacity. Because of the dingoes and everything else, we're back to 5,000 sheep at the moment. We used to run 10,000, but we've had to fence it, and outside the fence we aim to run 800 head of cattle, but used to only run about 500 head before. But it all depends on seasons and what happens. It's very interesting when you go back through the diaries and see what information in stocking rates has happened on this place over the years. The main thing over the years has been passed on, and what we've learnt is don't overstock. Mitchell grass, if you harm it, it'll harm you, it won't grow back. And I know a lot of people beg to differ, but if you haven't got stubble for Mitchell grass, you haven't got anything to grow. Because I do know in 82 it was dry and we lost a lot of stubble, but it grew back again after a good season of rain. But the biggest thing is don't overstock it. One of the biggest things why we're losing a lot of Mitchell grass out in this country is gidgee. It's creeping out all the time and it's getting worse, and we've noticed even since we've had no sheep outside the fence in the Mitchell grass where it is growing, we've had rain, that the gidgee is taking over, so that's going to encroach on all the Mitchell grass there. Now our biggest aim is for management of the Mitchell grass is to the stocking rate. Too many stock, just as we all know, decimate the country, but the biggest thing is to destock at the right time and let the grass come back, which is a major thing, and it always has been a major thing over the time history of Tubrac that we've learnt, and what I've learnt over the years from my ancestors. Yeah, some of the country we do spell if we can. It all depends where it is and what sort of rain we have. Some of the country does want spelling, it really does. Like our river country over there, it needs spelling, and once again it needs a big flood over it, and we're due to have it in 20 years. But the seed bed's there, but it needs a flooding to bring that seed up for the grasses. But more inside the fence, the downs and the pebbly ridges, the main thing is not to eat it and look after it if you can. When we have flooding and good seasons, we leave it till it grows out till we start restocking if we have to restock. Usually we try and breed most of our sheep. We haven't bought too many over the years, and we find that's a better way of letting our country rejuvenate. The same with the cattle outside in the river country. If it's eaten down and we haven't got a lot of cattle, we just run along with that until we think there's enough feed, and we either buy some or adjust it. But that once again, once the feed starts disappearing, we say, well, goodbye, we want to save the country. Like now, we're pretty lucky with grass, but when it rains and we're looking for grass to grow back, one of the best things we find is to have sheep in this country. The sheep eat all the herbages and perennials before they start eating the grasses, and that allows the grass to grow back. We've noticed this ourselves with cattle. They eat out the other grasses. They eat out the grasses as well, and therefore your young grasses disappear. But that's the only way that we know of is put your sheep in and let them do it, but less stock so it can grow back again. We look after our grasses by destocking. We don't lock up paddocks. Some little paddocks, holding paddocks we do, but a lot of it is we just spread our stock out so we're not overstocking the country, because overstocking, as I said before, it just does not do this country any good whatsoever. Our Mitchell grass country, we like to see it seed. I know it doesn't always seed, but we've been very lucky. The rain we've had this year, a paddock has gone to seed. Well, a lot of it has gone to seed, and which is good because you get the seed base there. But that paddock we've only had a little mob of sheep in to let it seed and come back. But on saying that, some of our country that's wild with mitchell grass, we have cut for hay, and you have to be careful doing that as well, because the stock can overgraze it. But the last few years, the hay that we have cut, the mitchell grass has come back even better and fresher, and the seed that's on it is unbelievable.
With the magic of virtual travel, we meet David and Liz Wheel, who live and operate Ravenswood, a 42,000 acre cattle property in the Aramac district. On an artesian bore drain, a rare and threatened species of fish has made its home. The edge-basted goby is a small fish listed as a threatened species under Commonwealth legislation. The move to have all artesian bores capped by 2027 means the fish could lose its habitat. David Wheel explains.
Has been going since the late 1800s, 127 years I believe, and we don't know how and when the fish got in there, but it's a bit of a miracle that they did, and then survived there. So yeah, very lucky fish. The state government declared that there should be no more open bore drains by 2027, so the bore had to be shut down, and now we're in the process of preserving some wetlands to preserve the fish. The fish exist in 2 other locations, but as far as we know, that's the only places they exist in the world. And so we're giving them the best chance we can to continue existing here. Desert Channels employed someone to check the channels and creeks and things for endangered species, and they found this one. We don't think they impose any problem or cause any problems for us. They only take a very small area, and so yeah, we're happy to have the DCQ build the wetlands. It's only a small wetlands, and keep the fish alive there. It doesn't affect the way we run the place at all.
So this is going to be our artificial pond area. We're going to have the water flowing in from the bore drain head to up in this side. It's going to flow down and sort of stimulate the bore drain that they have already, the natural, and it's going to flow through here back around this way, and it's going to end in a pond up that end. There's going to be a deep end and a shallow end, and then it's going to go back into a pipe into the bore drain that they've already got established. We're doing this so that the edge-bashed goby can have somewhere to reproduce without the gambusia. We're going to have it lined with sand and vegetation so that when the kumbungi comes in here, we should be able to easily lift it out. And we're going to have a fence around it to protect it from the deer and the goats and the pigs that we have in the area. And then we're going to have some traps around to try and catch the cane toads. So the aim of the project is to have landholder-based management of assets, whether it be an endangered species or something like a wetland or springs that are emerging. It's been on this land for a while. They've managed it for a long time, and we just want landholders to feel comfortable, give them skills and knowledge and help them to be able to manage this without interference.
When they first told us there was an endangered species here, we were a little bit concerned. We've seen other properties be taken over by the government to spare these endangered species, but because the fish only takes up a very small area, yeah, we don't see any threat to our business at all. We run about 3,000 head of cattle on 2 properties, and we only save weaners. We don't grow anything out. We're not big enough we don't own enough land to really start producing bullocks or anything like that, so we find it a far better deal selling weaners, and so that's how we operate our business. To begin with, my brother is a well borer, and he was offered the job by Adani, the mining company, to find flowing bores that could be capped so that they could have water credits for themselves. And Brett approached us, and of course we've gone into an agreement with Adani. They've given us all the water we can use, domestic and stock water, and they've replaced the pipelines, replaced the bore drains with pipelines and trobs, and closed all the bore drains down except for the one with the fish in it. And they knew before they started that there was fish there, and we told them that we wouldn't be shutting the bore drain down and killing the fish. They might have been a little bit disappointed to start with, but I think they've settled down now. Adani doesn't have anything much to do with us now. They've got the water credits they wanted, and they've preserved the pressure in the bore. They seem to be obsessed with water pressure, and they come about once every couple of months and check the water pressure in the bore, and that's about all they have to do with us. We're happy to help DCQ build a wetland and do this conservation work. We think it's good. We think it's something for our children, and it sort of helps a little fish out. It's a little spoke in the wheel, I guess. It doesn't intrude on our everyday business, running of the business. It's actually very little to do with our business at all.
By partnering with Desert Channels Queensland, the Wheel family demonstrates to the wider world that they have the welfare of this species at heart and will do whatever is necessary to maintain its watery environment, while still conducting a viable cattle production operation. And Longreach calls at the end of the tour. What a diverse cross-section of landholders and operations we have seen today. These people are only a fraction of the landholders across the rangelands of outback Queensland, actively implementing processes of natural resource management to deal with invasive weeds, a variable climate where multi-year droughts are more the norm than the exception. Younger generations of landholders and older partner with organisations like Desert Channels Queensland to develop new and innovative ways of managing the issues. These are people who believe that to build a sustainable business in this unique and beautiful place means building a landscape that is environmentally sustainable, built on the foundation of biodiversity. And we have had a taste of that direction with the people we met today.